guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing my February reading wrap up. I definitely had a much smaller reading month. I think I read 8 books, something around there. So definitely smaller, but it is a shorter month. And I was super busy this month. I started rehearsals for the show that I'm directing, so my weeknights are very busy with rehearsal. And I feel like I've just gotten so much schoolwork this month as well. They're just trying to cram it all in before spring break. So I've been busy with like schoolwork and rehearsals and just all that kind of stuff. So I didn't have a lot of time to read. I also did read a lot digitally because I could take my books kind of on the go with me and it was a little bit easier. So I did read a lot of digital books, but there's definitely a much smaller stack this month than any other month. This month I did try to prioritize romance because Valentine's Day is this month. So I feel like I read majority romance, but I did read a lot of nonfiction this month as well. So without further ado, let's get into the video. The first read of the month was something that I was super duper excited to read, and that is The Art of Catching Feelings by Alicia Thompson. I was super duper excited to read this. This just sounded like a book that I thought that I would really enjoy. I don't know why, but I feel like I've just been loving sports romances recently, and this one was baseball, which is one of the few sports that I know a decent enough about. And so I was very excited to read this. I ultimately gave this a 4 because I did like it. There was sort of the you've got mail trope in that they were communicating with each other anonymously, which is one of my favorite tropes. However, one person knew, and so I feel like that almost kind of ruined it for me because the whole time I was just waiting for that person to tell the other person, and there were so many opportunities to do that. And I feel like the reveal should have happened earlier in the book. It literally happened right at the end, and I feel like it definitely should have happened a little bit sooner. But all in all, this book was really cute and I did really enjoy it. So a 4 from me. Next, I read a book on NetGalley called Main Characters. I wanted to like this. I chose to read it because I thought it would get me excited for spring and summertime. But honestly, both female main characters were just so insufferable to me. They acted so childish, and at first I was like, okay, they're both kind of going through something, so maybe that justifies their actions a little bit. But honestly, it was just so annoying to read about, and the story just got really repetitive, really redundant. I didn't really care about either of the romances in this book either. I did give it 2 stars because I feel like there were some moments where I was a little bit invested, or there were some moments where I was like, oh, this is a nice moment, but all in all, not my favorite. And this is obviously no hate to the author at all. I just think that this wasn't really the vibe that I needed this month. It was not my favorite. Then I read Heartbreak is the National Anthem, How Taylor Swift Reinvented Pop Music by Rob Sheffield. My dad got me this for Christmas and he was super duper excited for me to read it. So I read it this month so I could talk to him about it. I really liked this book. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I think the writing is probably why I loved this book. Rob is a fantastic writer. I was just in love with his prose. Super great. He also has met Taylor on multiple occasions, and so a lot of his little personal anecdotes about his interactions with her were in here, which I thought was so cool. And he clearly knows his stuff and is very knowledgeable about Taylor Swift and her life and just everything. I did see a few negative reviews for this book. A lot of people don't like how it kind of jumps around and doesn't really go chronologically. It kind of tries to go chronologically, but it doesn't. And a lot of people didn't like the personal anecdotes, but I really did. I thought that they created a bigger impact in the book. And honestly, I didn't really care if it wasn't chronological. I just wanted to keep reading more of his prose because he is a phenomenal writer. He has another book that my dad really likes called Life is a Mixtape or something that I really want to read. I think he's a really cool author, and this added to my nonfiction goal for the month. Then I read an ARC copy of What Happens in Amsterdam by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I loved this. Obviously, it's Rachel Lynn, so I did enjoy it. I will say it has the marriage of convenience trope, which I've never read a book with that trope in it before, and I don't think it's my favorite. I gave it a 4.25 just because I didn't love the whole concept, but I did, you know, there were still so many great moments that I really enjoyed, and the characters were so sweet to each other, and this book made me want to go visit Amsterdam. Like, the descriptions of it were so vivid and beautiful, and I was like, I need to take a trip there now. And I also really loved just the story about our female main character kind of finding herself and figuring out herself and her own journey. I love it when romance books have that, because that's something that I really relate to, and something that I often search for in books, is like finding myself and just figuring all that out. So I really liked that and enjoyed that. Then I read Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. This, I fear, was overhyped. I gave it a 3 stars. I thought it was just okay. It was just pretty mid to me. I feel like it felt very rambly. Like, there were moments where like stories went on and on and on. And I feel like this is another book where it like tried to go to chronological order, but then it would jump into this side story that happened way later in the future. And then as you kept reading, you got to the chapter about that side story, and then you were like, I kind of already read about this earlier. There was also like these little recipes that she would like put in that I felt like were a little bit unnecessary, and there was also these like emails that she put in that I also thought was a little bit odd. There were some lessons in this book that I was like, this is good, this is a good takeaway. I think this is a book I need to read when I'm a little bit older, maybe like 25 or 26. I feel like I would appreciate it a little bit more in like my mid to late 20s, rather than freshly 21. I'm not freshly 21, but like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I was a little bit too young for this book. I also feel like I went in with such high expectations and then was kind of let down. And so I think that also wasn't great. So I gave this a 3. It was just okay, but it's definitely a book that I want to revisit in the future. Because I think it would impact me more, if that makes sense. Then I read another NetGalley book from one of my favorite authors, Emma Lord. I read For the Record, which is another one of her adult romance books. I love all of her YA romances. I've read all of them. And then I read The Breakup Pact last year, which was her first ever adult romance. So I think this is her second, but don't quote me on that. I loved this. I also gave this a 4.5. I loved the banter. It was so funny, and I loved just like the fact that it took place in the music industry. I love books about the music industry. I don't know why. It's just something that really fascinates me. And so reading about, you know, these 2 stars in the music industry, and it was a second chance romance, which I normally don't like, but I thought it worked really well in this book. And they were just so sweet together, and there were so many just very emotional moments that I thought were really beautiful and really impactful. But I also feel like it was a good commentary on the music industry and how toxic and corrupt it can be. So even though it was just a cute, fun little romance story, I still feel like I learned a little bit about the music industry and kind of the dangers of different contracts and things like that. So that was super interesting and fun. I had a great time with that. Then I read Flawless by Elsie Silver. Guys, I was not expecting to fall in love with this book. I picked it up because I saw it all over TikTok. I was influenced, and usually I have bad feelings about TikTok books, particularly TikTok romance books, because most of the times I don't like them, and also most of the time they're pretty spicy, which I don't love a lot of spice in my books. There are a few exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, I typically don't love spice, or at least a lot of it, or like very graphic spice scenes. I mean, I don't mind like 1 or 2, but when they're very detailed and graphic, it makes me a little uncomfy. And so I went into this book and I was very nervous about it, but I fell in love, guys. I would argue that this is a sports romance as well as a cowboy romance, because like bull riding is a sport. So I think that's why I loved it. And I loved the premise. I loved Rhett as a character. He was just, so good. And I'm really invested in like the other brothers, because I know that this is a series, you know, involving the other brothers. I'm really invested in them because I loved their dynamic and their like banter with each other. So I'm really excited to read more of the series, and I love just like the small town setting of Chestnut Springs, and I hope that gets sort of further developed as the books go along, because I feel like it wasn't super present in this book. But I loved this. This was a spicy book, I will say. There were several scenes, they were pretty graphic, but I still gave it 5 stars. I'm sorry, I love this book. It was such a fun time. I just had just a great time with it. And it was my first 5-star of the month, so I kind of ended on a positive, so I always love to see that. Speaking of ending on positive notes, I also read the 5th book in the Keeper of the Lost Cities series, which is Lodestar. This was also a 5 out of 5. I loved the pacing of this book. It was perfectly paced. This is the 5th book in the series, and there's definitely been some books in the series where the pacing has been really off. The first book had great pacing, and this book also had great pacing. I feel like I've always sort of been in the 4 to 5 range with these books. I haven't really given anyone anything lower than a 4. So we'll see. It's also one of the longest series that I've read. I typically don't love long series because I don't know, I just prefer trilogies. I feel like it's a big investment to sort of invest in a longer series. And since I spread apart my reads, I always get worried that I'm going to forget stuff. But I think the beauty of Keeper is it's a middle grade series. So a lot of times things that I do forget are sort of explained to me in the book again, so I can remember them, which is really great. I really loved this book. It was great. The pacing was great. My favorite character, Keith, was still funny in this one. Like, he's such a great character. I will say it was pushing a ship again that I don't ship at all, so that was kind of painful to read, but arguably I think that made my reading experience better because I was so much like, oh, I don't like them together, and so I just wanted to keep reading. So that was great. I ended with 2 5 stars for the month. So I think that's pretty good. I mean, I only gave one book 2 stars and one 3 stars. So I feel like all in all, it was a pretty good reading month. Lots of romance, but I'm excited for March to dive back in, and I have spring break, so I'm sure my count for March is going to be much higher. But yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe down below to see more book and lifestyle content from me. I also have a bookish Instagram where I post monthly wrap-ups with sort of in-depth reviews, and I also post book recs and just all things bookish. And then on TikTok, I do a lot of book videos, but I also do a lot of lifestyle videos, so if you're into that, check out my TikTok. I also have my Goodreads and my Fable linked down below if you want to check out either of those. Yeah, I think that's all. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!